Wonderful. Well, welcome and thank you for joining our session, Women in Agribusiness, how giving female farmers access to open and climate-friendly agronomic content pays off. Firstly, I'd like to thank the organizers and sponsors of the event. I'd also like to take the time to thank all the panelists and attendees who've taken time out of their day to join the session. Thank you. And lastly, I'd like to thank Stuart Collis, Senior Program Officer from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, for the opening remarks and to kick off the session. So over to you, Stuart. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Elias. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. First, I'd like to thank the organizers and sponsors of this event, USAID Feed the Future, BMZ, GIZ, DAI, and IntelliCap for helping shine a light on digital agriculture in low and middle income countries. The themes this year are all really relevant: locally led development, inclusion, climate, and data sovereignty. I'd also like to recognize that today's panel session has been made possible by the consortium under the GIZ project Digital Agriculture Africa with support from BMZ's Digital Lab. Along with BMZ and GIZ, this is a topic that we at the Gates Foundation are also quite interested in. We believe all lives have equal value, and how we execute on this vision in rural communities is by investing in agricultural transformation, supporting small-scale producers in their transition from subsistence agriculture to diverse, equitable income generation. And how we measure progress is through looking at small-scale producer productivity, incomes, household nutrition, and women's empowerment. And like many, we have an increasing emphasis on climate adaptation. In regard to gender specifically, you can find our gender integration marker online, where we assess investments in terms of gender intentionality and aspire to have more gender transformative investments that can help improve women's agency over resources. In regard to digital specifically, like our GIZ colleagues, we and others believe digital can be an enabler of more rapid agricultural transformation. With over 500 million smallholder farmers and pastoralists across the planet, in some countries, up to 60% of those being women, many simply do not have access to the information and services they need to improve livelihoods. The majority are rarely visited by an extension agent, have never, sorry if people could perhaps mute as they're coming in. Thank you. So yeah, the majority are rarely visited by an extension agent, have never received climate-informed advisory, do not have access to credit or risk mitigation tools like insurance or access to new market opportunities. So digital tools and services can help overcome some of these challenges. But this is not simple or easy, as many on the call would know. Digital services have challenges with adoption. Less than 13% of small-scale producers in sub-Saharan Africa have ever registered for a digital service, and even fewer are actively using them. And the gender gap for digital is persistent, with mobile internet usage around 36% less amongst women in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. And the biggest barriers are around cost, digital skills, relevance, and trust. With the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw an uptick in adoption of digital services out of necessity. And on the positive side, there is evidence that digital services can increase productivity and incomes by up to 30% and 25% respectively. And bundling these types of services together, such as finance, insurance, access to inputs, market linkages, with advisory, has a multiplier effect on those outcomes. Research has also shown that designing specifically for women has an outsized influence on the adoption and reach of such services. And that women, particularly women's groups, can be catalysts for communities and for adoption of new technologies, business models, and income diversification. One area that we focus on in this session that we think needs more attention, however, is content. Advisory services for small-scale producers needs to be timely, relevant, and accessible to all. Information such as the best time to plant, varietal or breed selection, recommended row spacings, pest and disease treatment, harvest timing, selling options, and financial planning are all critical information for farmers, and even more so as changing climate causes increases in weather variability. A less predictable environment makes traditional practices less relevant. So this requires a data-driven approach to help farmers get the right information at the right time for their specific geolocation and relevant to the conditions they are currently experiencing. In addition to traditional agricultural content, we've also seen how such channels can be repurposed for other content, such as COVID-19 health safety information. So for these reasons, I'm really excited to hear about the types of content being hosted on the Mercy Corps Sprout platform and how their partners are developing, designing, and distributing and establishing trust with women in agribusiness. Because if we can overcome the barriers to more equitable access to digital services and content, it can have an enormous impact on millions of smallholder families around the world. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Elias, and look forward to the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. So I'm going to just, as part of the session, I'd like to provide a brief overview of the Sprout platform. So just give me 1 second while I set up the presentation. Great. So as I indicated earlier, I'd just like to take some time to provide a short overview and introduce Sprout, the open agricultural content platform, a consortium member of the GIZ Digital Agriculture Africa project, also known as DAA. The other consortium partners of the DAA include FSPN, who is supporting in the registration, mobilization, and training of farmer groups with specific focus on youth and women farmers on general ag best practices, soil health, and financial literacy. And also Comana, who operates a commercially viable digital market enabling platform that links farmers and small businesses to an ecosystem consisting of markets, information, and financial services. The DAA is a set of farm-to-fork solutions promoting zero contact to prevent the spread of COVID-19 by the use of technology. As part of the objective, the problem the Sprout platform has set out to address is that most smallholder farmers, as Stuart has eloquently described, have little access to updated agricultural information. Many studies have projected that agricultural productivity throughout the continent has not been able to meet growing demands. This has been attributed to environmental shocks, major disruptions, outdated agronomic practices, and not effectively leveraging 40% of the global agricultural workforce. And despite the contributions, women farmers face a unique set of challenges that hamper their productivity and growth. Some of these challenges, which Stuart mentioned, which I'll just flag again, are fewer opportunities for education and access to agricultural trainings and extension services, limited access and know-how with regards to ag inputs or access to mechanization services, limited to little to no access to credit and other financial services, and greater workloads in addition to their other responsibilities. There is a vast pool of modern agricultural information, but it's not easily accessible. Digital platforms and technology can help bring this practical agricultural information to farmers and aid them grow more healthy, nutritious, and profitable crops. And technology has also made the sector more attractive to the youth and easier to reach women farmers. Based on our previous AgriFin engagements and experiences that include our recent digital emergency response work on COVID-19 and desert locust infestations, we've learned that crowding around existing and open content through digital platforms could be a scaled pathway to reach larger numbers of farmers. As part of GIZ's DAA project, we set forth to design Sprout, where a wide range of content can be consolidated and shared amongst partners before being distributed to smallholders, where they can use this information to build their capacity and become more resilient. And as one of my colleagues eloquently has kind of described it, so envision a B to B to C solution where content producers and providers upload and share agricultural content and information, which then ag tech and farmer-facing organizations can easily access, adapt, contextualize, and share these resources with the farmers they support to utilize as part of their regular farming practices. As part of the Sprout platform design process, we've identified high-quality digital content from a wide range of highly reputable and trusted organizations that include AGRA, CGIAR, CalRO, the Ethiopian ATA, Producers Direct, Media IE, and many others, which we've worked with them to further curate, adapt into digital and farmer-friendly formats. The benefits of the Sprout platform include and are not limited to access to high quality content at little to no costs, the ability to extend the reach of existing expert content, reducing obstacles for farmer-facing organizations and ag techs to access content from trusted and reliable sources, and the ability to reach a larger number of farmers in a shorter amount of time. There's also the ability to support farmers build on their existing knowledge and also support them to develop new skills and expertises. And it also allows or creates an opportunity or the ability to work with partners, support in the development of targeted or even gender intentional content intended to support women farmers, adapt new practices and behavior change. And lastly, improve resiliency, increase yields, and increase income earning opportunities. As of today, through the Sprout platform, we've onboarded more than 25 organizations that have the potential to reach upwards of 10 million farmers. Through our engagements and utilizing the platform, 2 million plus messages have been pushed out, and more than 200 farmers have engaged with this messaging, of which we've identified 50,000 to be women farmers. The platform has been currently in use in Kenya, Ethiopia, and Nigeria, with plans to expand into new markets and geographies. Content is available in English, Swahili, and Amharic, with plans again to expand into additional regional and local languages. The content is currently available in digital formats that include SMS, IVR, face-to-face training material and fact sheets, WhatsApp messaging, and again, with plans to expand to audio, video, and other chat services. As of right now, we have somewhere upwards of 40 value chains, content sets, which involve crop, livestock, climate smart agriculture, financial literacy, COVID-19s, and again, with plans to expand into additional value chains. Moving forward, we also plan to enable interactive API access to provide, again, as Stuart had mentioned, hyperlocal and smart farming services through our partners to ensure that everyone has access to relevant and specific content based in real time. And again, this is just a quick snapshot of the Sprout platform, which we launched in early or mid 2021. I really hope that you find this information helpful and possibly a resource that US practitioners can plug into or leverage in the future. So on that note, allow me to hand over the floor to Helena Eshetu from the IFC to moderate our panel discussion and learn more about how our partners have leveraged digital platforms to aggregate and disseminate critical information to women small-scale producers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elias, for that introduction. As he mentioned, my name is Helena Eshetu. I work with IFC's Agribusiness Advisory. Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to this panel. Thank you for making time, especially those of you who are sacrificing your evenings to be here. We're gonna do our best to make it worth your time. So let me quickly introduce our panelists. who are all part of organizations who have an important role to play in helping women, small producers, access the information they need to help them increase their productivity, yields, and incomes. So firstly, we have Kristen Peterson, who's a senior technical consultant and a Sprout product lead at Mercy Corps Agrifin, which is an organization that leverages digital technology and innovation to develop inclusive digital products and services that smallholder farmers need to increase their productivity, incomes, and resilience. We also have Dr. Boniface Akuku, who is the director of ICT at the Kenya Agricultural and Livestock Research Organization, or CARLO, which seeks to contribute to agricultural growth through research coordination and regulation, technology and innovation development, and catalyze transfer and utilization of agricultural research outputs. Next, we have Sharon Chacha, who's a program manager at Food Security for Peace and Nutrition, or FSPN Africa, which works with youth and women at the grassroots towards sustainable food and nutrition security. We also have Sophie Rotman, who's a producer of Shamba Shape Up Kenya, a popular farm makeover program, some of you probably know it, at the Media Company, which is a small social enterprise that's committed to addressing the information needs of East Africans through sustainable and research-based media productions. Next, we have Ken Gabayo, who's the director of digital agriculture at the Ethiopian Agricultural Transformation Agency, or ATA, which is a strategy and delivery-oriented government agency created to accelerate the transformation of Ethiopian agriculture with a focus on smallholder farmers. We also have Hafsa Jumare, who's the founder and CEO of Co Amana, a company that supports farmers and small businesses with digital market access. Just two left. Then we have Calvin's Okello, who is the CEO of M Shamba. And finally, we have Penina Wanja, who's the founder and managing director of DigiCow at Farming Tech Solutions, which is a Kenyan company that develops mobile agricultural technologies, including the dairy app called DigiCow. I know I went through that very quickly, but as you can see, we have a lot of speakers and a lot of content to get through. So what I'd like to do is just pose one question each to our panelists. Some of you may have a similar question. And just in the interest of time, I'll ask that you keep your remarks to maybe 3 or 4 minutes. And if we have time at the end, we'll take some questions from the audience. I see some have already been being put in the chat. And then if we have time, we'll also maybe do some follow-up questions that may come out of the remarks that you've made. So I'd like to start with Dr. Boniface, and I'd like to ask you, what is your organization's contribution to the Sprout platform, and how do you think it's benefiting Kenyan women smallholder farmers? And as a follow-up to that, how else do you support women smallholders through digital means? Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So, Carlo, as you know, is basically an organization that generates content. And as we generate content in all areas, whether livestock, crops, so we have been able to generate and provide content, which actually is currently hosted in the Sprout. Now, this content are basically not just ordinary content, but they are customized and basically relevant and intentionally targeting youth and women. So that's how we have contributed. So instead of just having content lying with us, we have actually ensured that they are actually uploaded on the Sprout, and they are actually customized to be for smallholder facing and basically intentionally targeting youth and women. Now, the difference that Sprout has made is that it has brought in market-facing actors in a single platform. And this has encouraged openness and transparency in the way content is accessed and the way content is used. And we could say through this, it has improved the principle of openness and seamless content provision and access, which is actually improving the livelihood of smallholder farmers particularly women in rural areas, and also the income of the same. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And great to hear you say that, especially about the increasing openness and transparency, which is very much important for information access. So next, I'd like to direct my question to Temesgen, somewhat of a similar question, but how did you create or share agricultural content before Sprout existed? And has the platform addressed the challenges that you encountered through your previous approaches?
Thank you, Helena. Before the Sprout platform, we create the content by bringing different researchers and experts, scientists in the agriculture from the ministry, Agricultural Research Institute, and develop a content or customize the content to make it fit for our platform. Maybe just to give a background, we have advisory service, which is 8028 hotline, which is being introduced like 6-7 years ago, and it has been delivering different agricultural content for smallholder farmers in different contents, like in crops, livestock, and other areas. So for developing this content, we have to bring different experts, and they have to come and summarize this content, and they have to make it compatible or fit for our advisory. So, but now with the Sprout platform, we can get a very appropriate content for our platform, for our IVR, for our SMS, and the only thing we can do with this is we can customize or adapt to our situation. For example, we use the COVID-19 response content. We also used digital financial literacy content and included into our platform so that it can be accessed by about 6 million of our platform users. So this platform and the initiatives, a similar initiative, will help us to get content very easily and disseminate with the platform we have. So I think this is very important platform. Thank you for that.
Very good, Temesgen. Yes, I'm familiar with the 8028 hotline, which is impressive, both in terms of its reach and its comprehensive content. So it's good to hear that Sprout has been able to help you actually even build on what you have there by being able to add customized and timely content. So now I'd like to switch over to some of the technology developing companies. And my first question, I have a similar question to Hafsa and Sharon. Perhaps Hafsa, you could go first. And what I'd like to ask you is, what challenges have been pointed out by the women smallholders that you support, or which ones are most frequently mentioned? And how do your digital platforms and services better help them to access agricultural content? Hafsa, over to you.
Thank you very much, Helena. So I think one of the challenges that we see or we hear from women is about market access. Where can they sell for the best prices? And of course, then we hear them kind of give us complaints about access to input, access to right best practices. And what we've done with Sprout is that we've been able to take content from Agra, from Karo that was on Sprout, customize it to enable women to know the best practices, and not just the best practices, but also direct them to the people that can give them access to those input, equipment, tools that enable them to meet those best practices. And then we've also been able to point them in the direction of different markets. So for instance, we can tell them, if you meet this quality based on the practices you follow from the Sprout content, you're able to access this type of buyer and get better prices for your produce. And I think that has helped a bit. And as far as putting out content, I think we worked with the AgriFriend team, the Sprout OCAP team, to figure out how best to also communicate to these women. So it wasn't just about putting out content, but kind of developing a toolkit that went back to Sprout that enabled us to figure out how to communicate to these women. And I think so far we've been successful. We figured out the best kind of empathetic ways to get content to them, the best people to get them to talk to them, to get them to trust this content. We've been able to also understand how we kind of develop relationships with them. They call into our call center. We send them messages. So it's been an interesting kind of a journey to see this content come from Agra, Cairo, go to Sprout. We worked with the Sprout team and Basara to make it aligned with the woman's behavior. And then it goes back to Sprout after going to the consumer and they actually test it. So I would say it's been a beautiful journey, and I would encourage everyone to check out Sprout, but I would also love to see more of these collaborations because they have been useful to us.
Yes, thank you so much for that, Hafsa. I think you've mentioned some important points. It's not just about giving farmers the information or the content. Sometimes that interactivity is also important. So when you refer to it as a toolkit, I see it as a more comprehensive solution. So I thought that was an excellent point. Thank you. Sharon, let me come to you with the same question. What are the challenges that you hear from the women smallholders you support, and how are you able to kind of address these challenges, at least in terms of helping them access agricultural content through digital platforms? Sharon, are you able to hear me?
Hi, Leela. I think we might have lost Sharon.
That's okay.
You can come back to her later, yeah?
Yes, the perils of virtual meetings. Okay, we'll come back to Sharon. So let me go to Penina, Calvin, Sophie. I have a similar question for the three of you, starting with Penina. How have you used the Sprout platform so far? And if you haven't, how do you envision using it moving forward? And how do you think the women small-scale producers that you support can benefit from the content on the platform? Penina, over to you.
Okay, thank you.
Penina, you've muted.
Okay. At DigiCow, we have used Sprout since it began last year. And our experience with Sprout is it has enabled us to be able to deliver content that is very simplified to the farmers without the DigiCow team being the people to actually work on that content. So we are able to do other things. And when it comes to delivering the information, we simply go to Sprout and we are able to actually pick it up and do dissemination to the farmers. We have received a lot of support from Carol. Initially, what we used to do is they gave us a desk in their office, so we could actually travel there so that we can get the content for farmers. But with Sprout, we just go online and we are able to do this. And we have gotten very good results. We have reached to a very wide and many farmers. And we also have a very key focus on women. And with women, we work with them through groups in a very digital way. And what we have seen benefiting the women is women want more time to trust something. They need more time to actually start using, experimenting this information. And we have been, the Sprout has been able to give us the information in a very simplified way. And farmers are actually able to connect to that information. With DigiCow, we have done a lot around breeding. This is a key area for dairy farmers, especially the small-scale farmers, where they are not able to know if their cows need artificial inseminations, if their cows can no longer conceive. So this has been very critical. And through Sprout information and working with these farmers, especially the women in groups, they have been able to fully understand how to check their cows, how to understand if the cow needs this artificial insemination, and actually call in for actual services. And we have seen a lot of farmers requesting to be connected to service providers so that their cows can actually be served. We have used information around financing too, and with the small scale farmers. And in Kenya, when they work in groups, they do a lot of savings and a lot of merry-go-round. And when we deliver the information around financing, they are able to actually even call in actual financiers or actual institutes so that they can be able to open up accounts, do further saving. And actually, they are starting to even think around, can they take credit? Can they improve their farms, etc. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Penina. So I just want to come back to something you said at the beginning, which is about not needing the technical people to help you put up the content, which is so important because then it shows that the platform is user-friendly, not just for those accessing the content, but even for those creating it, which I think can really help in terms of streamlining the process and also just encouraging you to be more active in that content creation. So thank you for that. I see that Sharon has now joined us. So Sharon, if you're here and if you're able to hear us, I did have a previous question for you, which is about the challenges that you most often hear from women smallholder farmers and how you think that the digital platforms and services can better help them to access agricultural content.
Hello, Elena. I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you. We don't see you though. Okay, we hear you and see you.
Okay, technology is also good, but it can also mess you up. Apologize. So thank you very much for that question. Great question. So in my experience working with smallholder farmer women, the biggest issue is access to extension services, which basically means that they don't have access to up-to-date information on climate smart agriculture, and also technologies on how to apply some of these climate smart agricultural practices. If you look at the ratio of an extension officer, a recommendation by FAO is 1 to 400, but currently we have one extension officer to 5,000 or to up to 1,000 farm households. So at what point will these smallholder farmers actually get information? And for us, that means then we have to look for channels for these farmers to keep getting information because climate is changing, there are new technologies, there's new innovation. So how do you make sure that they access this information? And this situation was even made worse by COVID-19. So you talk to an extension officer, yes, they're willing to go to the field, but then there's the restriction of COVID, And so leveraging on information, having that open access to farmer-friendly content, it's enabling us to reach our farmers without even training them. Again, look at the numbers. When we started as FSP, we were just working with 400 farmers, but now we are working with over 5,000 plus smallholder farmers, and this number is bound to grow. You cannot manage that doing in-person training, which means you really have to leverage on content, on digital content. You have to leverage on content made from Sprout and other platforms to help you be able to reach the smallholder farmers and help them maximize on agricultural profitability and also sustainability. Over to you.
Yes, fantastic. Thank you for that. I'm happy to hear you say that. I mean, not so much that we want women to have the challenge of extension, but knowing that that's one of the biggest challenges emphasizes the importance of what we're trying to do in terms of helping them to access information and the importance of digital platforms as a way to reach a lot of people at once. So thank you for that point. I'm now going to head over to Calvin's and ask him the same question that I asked Penina, which is, how are you using the Sprout platform? And if you haven't yet, how do you envision using it moving forward? And how do you think that women small scale producers can benefit from the content on the platform? So Calvin, it's over to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I hope I'm loud and clear. Yes.
I hear you very well.
Thank you. So let me say that before Sprout, the cost of accessing content was very high for us as an organization. So as a startup, we would sometimes scavenge for content or go to digitize textbook content, and with the support of some experts or lecturers here and there, but this was not really, we couldn't scale to many value chains. So Sprout has made it easier for us to have a one-stop shop for contents by different experts. We are even glad that contents that are just specific to some countries like Tanzania are available on Sprout. So this is also a springboard for scaling for organizations like us. So how we use the content, first of all, what we did was to capacity build our field officers with the content. So shared it with them, and as our chief agronomist took them through. And then because our field officers are a point of physical contact, as we disseminate the content digitally. So we mix digital dissemination with on-ground support. And this has really helped in terms of achieving the kind of results that we have been looking at. We did a survey some time back on the most popular ICT by farmers, and we realized that most farmers in rural areas still listen to radio. So what we have done is that we have been able to mimic the radio experience, but now we have digitized the audio. We've made the content into audio, which now the farmers are able to listen through via platform. So when they are able to dial a particular number, they're able to listen to the platform, and they also have a dial number for an officer for support. So this has really helped us, because we find farmers doing their own things and still listening to the content continually without much interruption. So that's how we've used it. And what we have seen is that for female farmers, because their main need is also better, and they will want to get the best quality, So digital extension, a bit of some agricultural practices, and to some extent really helps in improving the quality of the produce that are destined for market that fetch even better prices. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Calvin. I thought it was interesting that you brought up the radio example and how you're trying to mimic that, because I think in this day and age, especially, we're trying to move forward with technology at a very fast pace, but that's not always realistic in rural communities. So it is important to work with a format that is applicable, that's relevant, that's accessible to farmers. So the fact that you're going for something that's like radio, which is already accessible to farmers, I thought was very important. So thank you for mentioning that. Sophie, a question to you. This is a similar question to the last two that we had. Again, how are you using the Sprout platform so far? If you haven't, how do you envision using it moving forward? And what benefit do you see for women smallholder farmers accessing the content on the platform?
Hi, good evening. Yes, thank you for that question. In terms of how we've been engaging with the Sprout platform, it's really, I think both Shamba Shape Up and iShamba have been content providers. So on Shamba Shape Up, which has been running for 12 years in Kenya, we visit smallholder farmers across the country, find out what their problems are, and then bring in different experts from our partner organizations, research, commercial partners, to provide solutions, very practical on-the-farm solutions. And this is a TV program that's essentially broadcast across Kenya. once a week for half a year. So it goes across the main growing season. And then we have iShamba backing that up. So that's our mobile call center in which people that watch the program can now SMS in questions, call in questions, etc. So iShamba is basically our digital support system that has over 500,000 registered farmers, of which 45% are women. So from our perspective, we've been really keen on building content in-house. We have been doing so for over 12 years. And recently, we've been working with Mercy Corps to also develop short videos, particularly on climate smart adaptation, which is a key focus of ours. And going forward will be a key focus also as we work in other countries. And I think that's important. It's interesting to hear from the other speakers because it sounds like a lot of partners have been really drawing from the content that's on the Sprout platform. And I think that's a good thing. And maybe also having more uniform advisory helps if this can get out to smallholder farmers. From our side, we've been really focused on working directly with smallholder farmers. So as the previous speakers have said, I think Sharon pointed out that extension basically doesn't exist in Kenya. So you've got one field officer to 5,000 farmers. For us, it's really important that we leverage on media, particularly television, but also mobile, to actually reach these farmers. So with timely weekly information, especially if we're talking about climate change adaptation and getting women included in those adaptation strategies, getting women financially included, we think it's really, really critical to look at how you can use mass media to reach as many people as possible. So as an example, on Shamba Shape Up, we're weekly reaching about 8 million viewers who tune in because they're interested. They're watching the program because they want to watch it and not because they've been told to do so. They're watching it and then they can engage with the backup platform that is iShamba and our other media that's working behind that. So I think that's really how we're reaching out to women, and we're very interested to see where this Sprout platform will go in future. But I think what we would also like to see coming out of the Sprout platform is partnerships. So there's a lot of organizations that, like ourselves, have the content, have been developing content for a very long time. There are probably also donors out there, research organizations that are looking to now actually scale out that information to farmers in a very practical way. So we'd also be keen to get partnerships, find out who those organizations are, because we've been establishing a really good channel that allows you to actually reach out to farmers in a very inclusive way. Beyond just creating the content, we actually have a way of getting that content out, which I think is a really key thing that needs attention and focus going forward, because it's really critical. Climate is changing, and it's really critical that farmers actually can access information in an easy way. They don't need to be very literate to do so, especially if they're watching television. Mobile is very inclusive. It doesn't have to be a smartphone. So I think those are really important things to keep in mind as platforms such as Sprout are being developed and grow in future.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sophie. I just want to kind of draw attention to the numbers you've mentioned. One, you've been around for 12 years, so clearly you're doing something right. And the other, I thought, figure that was very impressive is the 45% women that you have registered, which is great, because I think in a lot of places, a lot of initiatives are aiming just to get 30% women and not quite achieving that. So getting almost half women, I think, is a very impressive number. So that's excellent. I have one question for Kristen before I start going to the audience Q&A. So please, as you're hearing the panelists speak, if you have any questions, do drop them in the chat. We've had a few. I'm sure there are many more. So Kristen, now coming to you, how do digital open content platforms such as Sprout aid in content aggregation, dissemination, and customization so that farmer-facing organizations can reach their intended users? And if you could say a little bit about the ecosystem support for gender intentional approaches and just the integration of smart farming solutions. I know there's a lot of questions there, but because you are working on Sprout, I think you're up to the task. So Kristen, let's hear from you.
Thank you so much, Helena. And hi, everybody. It's really great to be here today. So just from your first question, how can platforms play a role? We believe that platforms that bring together content creation organizations and farmer-facing organizations can play a really critical role in scaling access to good information to smallholder farmers to improve their knowledge, their ability to earn income, and also to become more resilient to shocks like COVID and climate change. And just to give examples from Sprout, we believe that every smallholder farmer should have access to good content to help them make decisions. However, we've heard from all the panelists, it's really challenging. So we believe that that using digital and making content available in a farmer-friendly way, in various digital-friendly formats, can help organizations adapt, and get content out. And so, we at Sprout, as an open content platform, want to and are building, want to create and are working on creating a vibrant marketplace and ecosystem of organizations. We're a B2B platform. So we work with organizations, expert organizations that create content. There is so much deep, amazing content that's built by that local, regional, and global organizations have. But in many ways, they don't have a path to scale the reach out to smallholder farmers. And so we're working with them to get that content available and transform it so that it's ready to be adopted. Then we've heard from organizations who want that content, and they have that relationship with the end user farmer, so they can contextualize it based on how they work with that farmer. We can help them build their farmers' capacity. What we heard is, one of the things we heard that I was hearing from the different panelists, that trust is vital for women for adoption of new practices. And so we believe that the farmer-facing organizations are building that trust. They work with the women farmers every day, and so they know how to reach those farmers and how to communicate and engage with those farmers to learn and really change knowledge, action, and behavior. So the ecosystem that we're creating provides a path to digital to scale using digital platforms. And so what we also want to create in that ecosystem is feedback. So one of the really interesting things that we're doing right now is, for example, working with the DigiCow team, as we created content for dairy cows from CalRO. And CalRO being the authority on dairy cow content in the country, they were able to easily adopt that and use it for their farmer base. At the same time, they said something's missing. We need more content on breeding and insemination. And so they came back to us and said, can you get us more content? Because our farmers are really asking for this. So we created that feedback loop, went back to CalRO, and they were able to design and develop that content, and we were able to transform it to make it adoptable. So this is the kind of ecosystem that we want to build. That I think Media, Sophie said it as well. We want to not just build content that is accessible, but we want to build this ecosystem where partnerships are developed, and we push that content to be better and better for across the entire ecosystem, and get feedback to content creation organizations as well as farmer-facing organizations. So what's in the future? And I know I need to go fast. Well, for women, what we think is really important is creating a gender intentional strategy for Sprout. And we want to do two things in the next year, thanks to support from DAA and GIZ. And also we're planning to work with some very gender-focused organizations, potentially CGAP. And we want to build a way to look at how can we create communication that helps women adopt that information. So we want to identify best practices on that. And then we also plan to work with key partners who are content users to test that out with their female farmers. So we want to create a gender intentional approach, a way for our partners who use content to adopt that approach. And then also we want to test it out with female farmers and get feedback and continue to improve on our recommendations. And so that's one thing. The other is we plan to deepen and widen content across countries, languages, channels, and particularly we want to add climate smart content. And then finally, and importantly, we want to start to trial and test live services that enable advisory based on the farmer situation. And so we'll be doing that in the next 6 to 9 months. We'll be working with some key content creators and service providers and some key partners to start to build out live services that can help farmers and women farmers get advisory that makes sense to them in the situation they're in at the time they're in, based on their location, based on the weather, and based on the crops that they're farming. So that's really where we're going. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Kristen. Lots of great points there. I just want to reiterate what you said early on about trust, the importance of trust, which is something that I think we overlook sometimes in extension and kind of training services, because just because we're saying this is what farmers should do, why should they listen to us, right? They need to trust, they need to know who is approaching them with this information. They need to know there's good intentions there, and they need to know that it's reliable. So I think the importance of trust is definitely one key takeaway for me from what you said. So we've heard from all of our panelists, and I want to thank you all so much for keeping your remarks brief. We did really well. We have a little bit of time, just under 10 minutes to take some questions from the audience. And now I think I've bitten off more than I can chew, because there's a lot of questions coming in. There is one that came in early on that I thought was quite interesting that I want to pose to you. And this is open to any panelist who would like to take it. And this is a question from Dennis Chege, who's asking, in this era of gender mainstreaming and women's empowerment, are we getting more women, A, developing more ICT solutions for agriculture, and B, entering managerial levels in agriculture? So I think this question is maybe one step beyond what we're talking about, but it is an important one, right? It's not, the women are not just passive kind of consumers of information. We also want the women to be active in the content creation. So is there any panelist who would like to maybe just reflect on that quickly? Feel free to unmute and just jump in.
Hi, yeah, Dennis, I'm happy to jump in on that question. I think it's a very good question, and I'd actually like to extend it. So, I mean, first, do we have enough women in managerial positions working in ICT for D? I think not. I think that's something that needs to be focused on much more. I think also when we see our panel today, and a lot of the times, a lot of these ICT solutions are still very much male-led spaces. And I think that needs to change. But I think the other key thing is who are we representing when we're sending out information, when we're actually engaging with farmers? So again, from our perspective, it's been very important that when we're on Shamba Shape Up, when we're on the TV program, that we're working with female experts, so that if we're talking about financial inclusion or conservation agriculture, the experts that we actually have on the program are women, so that viewers at home that are female can also relate, they feel represented, they're more likely to engage, they're more likely to get in touch with us. The same with iShamba, the call center staff, by half of the operators are women, so that if there's a woman calling in or asking a question, they're actually responded to by another woman. So again, I think that's a really good point, not just looking at how do we support women, but who are the people that are responsible for delivering the content, creating the content, and then actually engaging with farmers very directly.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Sophie.
Maybe I could just want to add something.
Boniface, please.
Yeah, I think what I would just want to add is that we did a study in Kenya to find out access and barriers to access and the use of digital content. And one of the things we found out is that there was gender disparity, in the sense that more men were accessing digital content than women. And we went further to find out that in most cases, particularly in the rural communities, women don't have smartphones. They just have feature phones. I mean, many times when they're bought phones by their husband or by their relatives, they tend to buy them the non-smartphones. And therefore, that's one challenge we found. The other challenge we found is that most organizations are not intentional about empowering women and being intentional about how can they access and use digital content. in agriculture. And one of the things we did in that project as an intervention was capacity building, where we started to train farmers on access and use of digital content. And our selection criteria was biased towards women and youth. And therefore, we found that as we're speaking today, in that particular county, which is like Laikipia County, we have more women accessing digital content and using digital content. And they're reporting quite a lot of positiveness. They are selling their produce. They are improving their productivity. So I think the underlying word here is to be intentional about how can we empower women to be able to access and use digital content. And that's what I wanted to add, yes.
Okay. Maybe I can also
Great point.
something. Sorry.
Yes.
I wanted to add something. True, we need to be very intentional. And this is something that Digital has really perfected. And for us to include the women, because we also realized the moment we keep the information in our app, we normally get the men being in a position to access the information by themselves. So we had to come up with a way in which we are able to actually include the women at the villages. And what we do is women are very comfortable working in groups. And so they will come to a farmer's point or a farmer's homestead. They'll sit there. We have a youth from the same village who comes in with digital app. He's able to actually play the video or play the audio and use portable speakers. And women are able to listen to the training content. And this training content, we develop the audios in a very entertaining way. So they are able to grasp everything that they need to understand. And this youthful person is able to do actual demonstration on how far these farmers can do or use the information. And once the demonstration is done, they are able to actually adopt. The following week, they meet again and they're able to evaluate the results. So you'll find that the women are now able to actually internalize and use the digital content and use it in their farm. You cannot believe it, but now they're even purchasing farm inputs from an online platform called Copia. The same women, but still in groups.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Benita. I think we may have time for one more question, which is an important one. And this is from Laura McNeil, who's asking, how do you, as the organizations contributing content to this platform, deal with delivering information in the local languages? So again, any one of you can take this, or any few would like to.
I think I can jump in very briefly, and that is that we work with our team to transform the content into key languages. For example, a lot of the content is in Kiswahili for Kenya. And then we work with, and I see Temeskin jumping in here as well. And they've translated content into Amharic. But one of the important things with Sprout is as we see that content translated, we ask our partners to give that content back. By the way, it's not just translation, it's also localization in terms of terminology. So there are a lot of important things to make it more adoptable by farmers. And so I'll stop there. But what we do is we try and complete that circle by getting that content back and adding it into Sprout again so that other organizations can take advantage of that content that's been translated. Over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Kristen. Go ahead, jump in, please.
Oh, yeah. So, actually, that's something we are actually going to request Sprout to give us content in different languages, because in Digicow, it's one single app, but we are able to actually target farmers, even using their own local language. So it's the same app, but farmers in location X, and they use a local language, they will hear their own language, and farmers in a different location will be able to get the same content, but in their own language. So actually, that's the next thing that we are going to request Sprout, if they can give us content in other major languages that are actually being spoken in Kenya.
Yeah, just Helena, just to add one thing on what Christine raised. Yeah, we adopted some contents from the Sprout platform, like COVID-19 and digital financial literacy, and we didn't only translate the content, but we contextualize to our context and get approval from, for example, in relation to the COVID-19, we get approval from the Ethiopian Public Institute, Public Health Institute, and we get back to the Sprout platform as we take from them. And so yes, we are availing the content and contextualizing and giving back to the Sprout platform so that it can be also used by other users here locally and also in other places if it's required. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Temesgen. So unfortunately, we are at time and I need to wrap up. Thank you so much for those of you who submitted questions, and apologies, we didn't get around to answering everybody's. I think they were all valid, but as you can see, we had a lot of speakers and some really key topics to discuss. From my perspective, I won't repeat anything really that we've heard, but I do want to mention a few things that really stood out to me. One was what Calvin's mentioned, how they previously were scavenging for content, which reflects how time consuming and unreliable it was previous to, you know, the existence of Sprout and other open content digital platforms. And Kristen mentioned being gender intentional, which is very important. I heard about partnerships, the importance of partnerships from a number of the panelists. And Boniface mentioned the gender divide, such as women not having smartphones and not, you know, and when we're developing content, not assuming that they do. And as Penina said, innovating different ways to make sure that we are able to actually reach our women. So my key takeaways from this conversation is that women, smallholder farmers, are a driving force behind agricultural and economic development. We just need to find a way to stop marginalizing them in delivering agricultural extension services. And so what we need to do is find the models that are working in the digital content space and make sure that they are sustainable so that we're helping all farmers benefit, and that includes women too. So I'd like to give a very big thank you to all our panelists. Thank you to Elias. Thank you to Stuart as well. Thank you to all who joined and made this a very lively discussion. And with that, I'd like to close the session and wish you a good rest of your day or a good rest of your evening. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Lina. Thank you all.
Thank you.
I think I'm being asked to remind you that there is a poll that's active, and we'd just like you to give us feedback on this session before you go. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.